The world has changed. In the last 5 years, the world in which we live in which we all grew up, has changed. We are living in a new economy. The old, orderly global world doesn't exist anymore. Many transformational events have happened, from pandemic to wars. They have accelerated this change. They are not the root cause, but they are the accelerators of this change. And this shift requires all industries, also our own, to be much more responsible and agile. And at the same time, to be more disciplined. What seemed like a sensible strategy just a year ago doesn't work anymore, and actually could be inappropriate just now, 1 year later. Adaptation beats detailed planning, and fast execution beats long preparation. This is different to what we learned in business school and in our MBA classes. So let's take a closer look at this from our perspective of the refractory industry. Continuing really poor macroeconomic conditions, global poor macroeconomic conditions. New economic policy measures, bureaucracy, reporting requests, all kinds of burden on us and our suppliers. Trade barriers coming through new geopolitical order that is in the process of making. They have resulted in an industrial market downturn that we have not seen since World War II. We have not seen 3 years of downturn, reduced demand and production in the heavy industries since World War II. The global financial crisis of 2008 was a cakewalk compared to the situation in which we are in right now. Even regions like India, the Middle East and Southeast Asia that we anticipated as the new bright spots, after China is more of a normal place now, even those places have also shown of weakness, notably this year. The Western economies are in an industrial recession due to low demand from the construction industry and the transport industries, mostly. But the biggest root cause for this shift probably comes from the shift of the economic structure in China. China is transforming from a supply-based economy to a demand-based economy. You know, for 50 years, when you built a factory in China, somebody would buy what you made. That worked for 50 years, but not anymore. And that shift happened in 2017. Why 2017? Because 2017 was the peak of the working population in China. Since then, the working population is declining. Not the overall population, but people who retired don't buy very much anymore. The working population is declining. But China has continued to just build plants. And now we're in 2024, and in every market in the world, industrial market in the world, China has a massive overcapacity. So the country is going through this deep shift from supply-based, we just build and they buy, to demand-based. Oh God, we gotta think of who will buy this if we build something. And this is very well understood in the elite in China. The impressively competent leaders of the Chinese economy on the national level and on the province level understand this. They explain this to me. But they need to change this. And this change is painful, it will take time, it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of adjusting. Foremost for the Chinese, but also for all of us in the entire world, because we are part of this, whether we like it or not. China is deeply accepting this responsibility, but still they can't change this overnight. China might keep exports of industrial goods such as steel, aluminum, glass, solar panels, EVs, and also refractories, permanently high because of this structural change, permanently for the next 6 years. Why 6? Because it's the end of this 5-year plan and the next 5-year plan starts in 2025 and they will have a high export quota in there. The draft's already written. So those high exports will not go away. And the Chinese government is not stimulating the economy like they did for the last time in 2016. Why? Well, because 2017 their working population peaked, so the stimulus doesn't work or wouldn't work anymore. This is the macroeconomic picture. Now let's get closer to our industry. What is the one brilliant thing that this industry has done for, I would say, since the beginning of industrialization, for 130, 150 years? We have continuously, every year, reduced the specific consumption of refractories. It's an incredible performance. Without big step changes, we're often being told that you're not very innovative in the refractory industry, but without massive, brilliant new things, every year we reduce the specific consumption. Can you imagine this for more than 100 years? This is fantastic. We can be proud about this. But this reduces growth every year. Unfortunately, refractory capacity, production capacity, continues to grow worldwide. It has increased and it continues to increase. New greenfield refractory facilities are still being built now, and more are being announced. I'll come back to this a little bit later. In India alone, 300,000 tons of new greenfield capacity will come up in the next 2 to 3 years. Replacement of Chinese imports, this is the reason why companies are building, is not really happening. Made in India is a policy, but not really a reality in the refractory industry yet. If our customers can buy for 2% cheaper from India, they will. So, not really a reality. Except for RHI Magnesita, almost every major producer is adding new capacity in this country with a greenfield investment. With the continuing recessionary trends in the global industry, the industrialized world's industrial production will go down further. What happens with the capacity there? How many shutdowns have you heard of anywhere? Not really a lot. So what happens with this? Well, those materials get exported also, right? Because from a microeconomic perspective, from a business perspective, that might make sense from time to time, hoping that the demand will come back in the industrialized world. But let me tell you, the demand will not come back. At least not to the level that it was 5 or even 7 or even 4 years ago, before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, demand will not come back in the industrialized world. Why is this? Because the end customer structures are being dismantled in Europe, in North America, also in Japan, and in Korea, and in some of the industrialized countries. So a recovery will happen, I'm confident, but it will recover to a lower level than it was before. It's a sad reality. As a market leader in this industry, we therefore avoid any capex for capacity extension. We also add capacity to certain sites and plants we have, but only if we shut something else down at the same level. And therefore, we focus on industry consolidation and efficiency improvement, because this fantastic track record of reducing specific consumption is really not yet finished. We estimate that currently the remaining excess capacity in the world on shaped refractories is about 40%. There's 40% too much refractory capacity for shaped refractories. And in mixes, it's even a little bit more than that. That overcapacity is bigger right now because we're in a recession. We also analyzed the greenfield projects, including our own, of the last 10 years. And the estimate we have is that the return on investment on these greenfield projects was between -5% return and +3% return. Depends on the project. And I'm sure in your boardrooms, when you asked for the money for those, the numbers were very different. In ours, at least, it was. Ladies and gentlemen, greenfield capacity extensions in the heavy industries, at least in refractory, is the mindset of the 20th century. As an industry, we need a serious introspection into this kind of expansionist strategy. Just like China needs to move from a supply economy to a demand economy, we need to move from a volume mindset to a value mindset. Because otherwise, eventually, we will lose our shareholders, even our family shareholders. The money that we are spending on these greenfield expansions should better be used for innovation, for consolidation, in order to get healthier structures, and also for the improvement of the sustainability of our industry. So sustainability, or is the name of our conference this year, or let me say more specifically, decarbonization. Decarbonization is the task of our generation and the next generation. As humankind, we have to eliminate these emissions. You can believe in a linear connection between man-made CO2 emissions and temperature increase or not, but man-made emissions are not foreseen in our nature. So we should eliminate those. And there shouldn't be any more discussions whether CO2 emissions are okay or not. They're not okay. So decarbonization now as a project it's kind of a European idea, because we have these green dreamers there, but it has now become a global topic. Let me go back to China, because we bash on China. But climate protection in China is moving from being an environmental policy in China to becoming an economic policy there. The climate tracker, which monitors emissions worldwide, independent tracking mechanisms by the United Nations. It tracks the rollout of renewables all over the world, proves that there's a significant reduction of new coal power plant in China. Still, they're building some, but a significant reduction. And China has announced that they will have peak CO2 emissions in 2030. But guess what? Those peak CO2 emissions will happen at the end of next year, 5 years earlier. More than 5 years ahead of target. China is pretty much the only country in the world that has been conservative on their target. They've been attacked on this, they have defended this, and they're 5 years ahead of this. They have surpassed their NDC, their nationally declared contributions for wind and solar capacity 6 years ahead of schedule. They have reached the 1,200 gigawatt that they announced for 2030 already in July of this year. And at the end of this year, they're at 1,300 gigawatt of solar and wind capacity. The non-fossil power generation capacity now in China already this year exceeds the fossil fuel power generation. Similar trends, from a trend perspective, actually can be seen here in India. The government continues to advance the green hydrogen policy with the updated National Green Hydrogen Mission. It's an important step to achieve this target of 5 million tons of hydrogen produced in India in 2030. The policy is not finished, the measures are not there, but it's advancing much faster than before. And the talk in Europe is maybe cheap and more passionate, but the action is here. The Steel Ministry of India has already identified the utilization of green hydrogen and carbon capture utilization and storage as a midterm focus area of the India government here to decarbonize the steel industry while this policy is still developed. Tata Steel, one of our customers, has committed to produce steel with 40% less emissions by 2030. 40% less. I don't know of any Western steel company that has this target. And by 2045, Tata Steel wants to be CO2 neutral. JSW has started executing projects in several phases for green steel with the investment of 70 billion rupees or $700 million US. Started to execute, not with somebody else's money, but with their own. So what about refractory emissions? Refractories don't emit much CO2 really. It's all in the raw materials. We need to step up to the plate and take responsibility. Because refractory raw materials just have one customer. Just one, refractory industry. We can decarbonize by not taking any raw materials anymore. Okay, then we're out of business. And of course, we can't do that. But we should take responsibility for this. We have to sit with our suppliers and decarbonize this chain. Maybe not tomorrow, and maybe we don't have all the tools, and maybe we don't have the answers, but we have to take the responsibility for this together with our suppliers. and not pretend that it doesn't concern us. We need to intensify working on measures like selecting CO2, more CO2 efficient raw materials. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. I hope everybody is doing this. We have to intensify our activities for more energy efficiency, green electricity. Hopefully, we're all doing this with the non-fossil fuel electricity available. We should also, however, support carbon capture and utilization, CCU technologies, to apply also in our industry. And we should reward those suppliers who do this. Not at any cost, otherwise we're not competitive, but we should reward them. And we have to go to our customers and explain them this and see whether we can still maybe get a little premium in order to pay for this. I would envision and propose our industry coming together to set our own emission reduction targets as an industry, or at least to set some emission reduction aspirations in order to move the mindset in our industry. This could be on energy consumption, but it can also be supported by recycling. We will hear a lot about it in the technical talks during the rest of this conference. Sadly, I feel that this vision is not shared by many leaders in our industry, and I would ask you to rethink your positions and come together. So, talking about our suppliers, let's talk a little bit more about how we strengthen the relationship with them. Not just for decarbonization, but also for supply security, because this is a huge request from our customers. And of course, it is linked to China because so many of our raw materials come from there. We have two areas on the front of our supply chain to cover for our sustainability. One is the diversification of raw material sourcing. One of those. Our major suppliers, industry suppliers, are the Chinese producers of refractory minerals. Let's face it, they're the most efficient in the world. They have always been consistent in what they make for us, and they have been pretty darn reliable over decades. But the changed global environment in which we are, the changed geopolitics put more and more pressure on this established supply chain. Raw materials in China, refractories all over the world. The old world doesn't work anymore. So, in this changed global environment, in order to ensure supply chain security and at the same time business sustainability, because sustainability is not just the environment, it's the business that needs to be sustainable there. Some degree of diversification in our sourcing networks might be helpful and maybe needed. What does this mean? Well, we buy less from China and we buy more elsewhere once it's developed. This bears conflict, doesn't it? We cannot run away from this because governments, probably led by the US government, will put this in place probably in a pretty mandatory way. So, how can we support our Chinese suppliers who will lose some share? Well, we could at least support them by potentially increasing the value for their materials. Because they're not making any money now. Where should they take the money for more sustainable raw material production. If we could pay them more, they can use some of these profits in order to invest them in decarbonization. Maybe we can link this when we talk to them. They can also bring innovation. The biggest industrial sector in the world is in China. There's a huge innovation power there. Innovation doesn't come from the Western world anymore. It's now made in India. It's made in China. So we can link value for our raw materials against innovation or cleaner products. So all of this change that we will be under pressure to execute doesn't happen against China. It happens in partnership with China. And just like Priya, before I end, I want to come to the talent in this world, in this refractory world. Our people, the talented young people, for whom we should be attractive. And here I talk about young, talented men and young, talented women. And we should name them both, because although, of course, we should pick the best people, the selection process might be different, maybe even the criteria. Knowledge management in our industry is often overlooked. There are very few refractory degrees left in the world. You cannot study refractory science or not anymore. And if we are frank to ourselves, we overlook this probably in our daily life as corporate people also. So where does this fantastic track record from specific consumption reduction come from? Well, mostly it comes from tribal knowledge. It's the knowledge in the head of a few people in our companies. It's always the same people. It resides in their brains. Mostly, actually, it resides in the brains of the very experienced people who've been there 29 years or more. But that's not very sustainable knowledge management, is it? Because many of them are coming to age, also in India. When I look in our industry, the experienced people are going to retire soon. So how do we continue building on and passing on this knowledge? This is another challenge, ladies and gentlemen, that we could tackle together rather than everyone for herself. How can we work more with academic institutions to maybe re-institutionalize formal studies on refractory science, courses at least to start, and maybe technical educational institutions? But also, how can we increase the respect for these experienced people who carry this tribal knowledge? Why we need to respect that knowledge in a way that that group of knowledge carriers become teachers, coaches, and mentors for the next generation and prepares the youth. Doesn't do it anymore, challenges the youth to do an even better job than that group has done for the last generation. How can we build a global talent network to prepare the next generation to lead the industry in 10 years? In 10 years, most of us will not be here anymore. For sure, I won't. But many of you won't either. But we will have the next generation sitting here and trying to solve the problems. How can we build this network now so they don't become individual fighters, but they become a group of powerful people moving the industry forward? At RHIM, we have put this in place. We have a young talent group, around 25 people every year, new every year. Brazilians, Indians, Chinese, Americans, Europeans, future leaders. They're all below the age of 30 or around the age of 30. They talk to each other every week, and they meet each other physically, routinely, several times per year to build this network. They will not all stay with us. But that network that they build now, that will last for the rest of their careers, and then they can call each other. And that creates value. It's not competitive leakage, it creates value for our industry. And we can do more of this across companies. Attracting diverse talent, especially attracting women, needs to be of an immediate to-do for us. Priya has complimented us and said, okay, there's some color in the room. But if we look in our top executive teams, I think we're laggards, not leaders. In RHI Magnesita now, after many years, we have 23% women in the top leadership. In the top senior leaders, this is the top 60 people, and they're super high performing. There's no performance difference, of course. But there's a thinking difference, and that provides huge value. This was hard to do for us, because of course no women are interested in the refractory industry, and this is not true. It's just a preconceived notion. But still, this was only a start. These are some of the many possible ways to make the refractory industry more attractive to young talents globally, while we improve at the same time the image of our space. The topic of sustainability that we have selected, especially decarbonization, is a sexy topic. It's an attractive topic for young people. And the message we should give to the young people who don't know us is we're not a dirty industry. We're an industry with a huge level of emissions where if you join, you can make a difference. You can actually have an impact. If you become a consultant, you can have an impact. You can consult somebody to have an impact, but you can't do it yourself. So we can offer something that very few can. This purpose is what young talent is looking for, and we should passionately bring it to them. I look forward to more of this discussion just after I sit down and stop talking during the Women at Refractories panel. I thank IREFCON for organizing this as a featured event right at the beginning of this conference and accepting our proposal to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, we have much to do. Much of this is in our hands, in our own hands. Whatever cannot be done by us can be supported by our various governments around the world and by our customers if we can verbalize it and speak out loudly and together. This, however, only works if we're reasonably aligned and agree on the main direction. The World Refractory Association, the WRA, and its main carrying regional and local associations, such as IRMA, could be the catalysts for this opinion building and for this alignment. We can win together, or we can remain a fragmented industry at the mercy of others, of other people, of other forces that are better organized than us. The choice is ours, yours, each one of us. Let us use this IREFCON to deepen the topics of our industry, the ones I have mentioned and the many more that you have in your mind. Let's wrestle with each other, and let's become better for the benefit of our customers and the entire world who absolutely needs refractories who relies on us to build the future world. RHI Magnesita is maybe the global market leader, but we don't know everything. Not by far, actually. We are humbly open for any discussion and for any opinion. We are listening and we're ready to change for any idea that's better than ours or that we have never had. And we are totally prepared to help in the overall improvement of this industry with our passion, with our hearts, and also with our money. Talk to us. Let's all come together during these days.